We are live. We are ready to go. Good morning, everybody, depending on where you are. It is nice to have you here with us on our Coach's Corner. We've got Coach Marshall Martin. How you doing, Marshall?
Hello.
And we've got one of our top accountability coaches, Catherine. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks, Jason.
All right, good. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Welcome. Marshall, you want to kick us off with some questions you've gotten? And if you do have a question, feel free on the bottom to add them either into the Q&A or into the chat. Either one, we will get to them. We've already got some questions that have come in from some members already. We're looking for anything else. Please feel free to ask away. So Marshall, I know you've got some. You want to kick us off?
Yeah, so good afternoon. Actually, good afternoon here, Central Time Zone. Jason, I know you're in Arizona, so a couple hours behind. But
I guess so.
You know, we're in big transition times as we go from, March 12th to early May. Everything's shut down. Now we're easing back in, kind of the what's next, what's the next normal, as I refer to it, instead of the new normal. And really, except for a couple of states, in some capacity, all states have, quote, turned back on in some elements. Really would like to get perspective from the two of you. What is your general feelings about what you're seeing, maybe a little bit of the awkwardness as people come back together? What are you seeing in regards to whether it's going out in public or starting to re-enter the workplace? What are you seeing in the worlds that you're being involved in? So, Catherine, I'll go to you first.
Yeah. So I think that, a lot of the members that we work with have just set a date to say, when are they coming back into the office? When are things going to go back to normal? And that date really is tentative. So, it might be pushed out. It might actually happen. But, at least here in the Middle Tennessee area, things are starting to open back up. People are starting to get out. I know I've still been in my little bubble and haven't gotten out much. The few times that I have, people are still taking precautions, as wearing your masks and things of that nature. But I would certainly say that a lot of folks are ramping things back up and working to getting back to some level of normalcy.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Jason?
Yeah, I think a lot of it just depends on where you are. So in Arizona, where I am, everything is open. So our stay-at-home order ended last Friday, and everything's been open for some things even open up before then, but everything's been open up. So people are returning to work. Offices are back open. Streets are starting to fill up with people. I think people here are at least still practicing some pretty good social distancing and being responsible with it. But even as I talk to members in different parts of the country, I talked to somebody yesterday in Los Angeles. They said people are starting to move around, even though they still have the stay-at-home order. People are starting to move around a little bit more. Texas has opened up. Florida is even starting to pick up a little bit. So it all depends on where you are. And I think as offices start to open, I think that's probably where people are going to see some of the challenges. Like, what does return to the office mean? How are people feeling about this? And I think that's important that we look into that. I don't know if, Marshall, you've had any of your members have any challenges as they've opened up some of their offices. Do you have any thoughts or feedback on that?
Yeah, I was on a call this morning with a company in Texas, and they have effectively reopened the office. However, the way that they communicated it, or have not possibly communicated it, may be setting a little bit of concern. And so the recommendation certainly that we have made is, follow your state and local authorities, follow kind of CDC guidelines, at the minimum, the basics, go back, wash your hands, don't touch your face, don't, those kind of things. But what we're seeing that typically has worked best is go into the workplace, set up cleaning protocols. You may have to move around some desks and so forth to create safe workspace. With this particular company this morning, they arrived at setting an A-B transition schedule. So there'll be an A group and a B group, and they'll actually alternate coming back in. They'll look at the most critical business functions that absolutely really need to be there, and how can they provide a safe work environment for them. And then they'll transition some of those functions into the workplace. But I think another thing I'm seeing as well is a lot of communication, because we watch, or people have watched so much news. It's really a moving target. Mask, no mask, safe, not safe, spreads 26 feet, spreads 6 feet. So there's just so much going around. It requires a lot of communication. That's a little bit about what I'm saying. Transition plans, most essential pieces, and then otherwise start to move towards a date in which would be desirable to get people back.
Yeah.
I also think that, oh, Joanne?
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah. So I also think it's important to have those have individual conversations with each person to make sure that, you know, they're comfortable going back into the workplace. You know, everybody's situation is different, whether you are around folks that are older than you that might have health issues that are pre-existing. You know, if you have children, everybody's situation's different. And you need to, you know, check out their level of comfort. You know, just because one person is comfortable, you know, going out and grocery shopping or seeing people doesn't mean somebody else is. And also, you know, taking into consideration, what are the precautions that you're taking in the workplace to keep things safe and to keep things clean. And if they are still pretty extreme, I think it's important to ask the question, should you be going back in right now?
I think it's a good point. I think one of the things I'm seeing too is very similar to sort of what Marshall was saying is, you know, are you taking the necessary precautions? I've got a manufacturing company. They actually laid out tape on the ground to keep people kind of working in particular areas. And so they're not continually crossing over the way they normally would, and they're taking a normal path. Like, this is the path you go. So they laid it out. This is the direction you walk. This is where you stand. Offices, kind of Marshall said, I've got a couple of people that are doing it where they're, you know, they're going to work a couple of days, you know, they're having broken up, kind of what you said, A, B, different days. People are in the office, out of the office, they've rearranged desks. But I think it's also challenging or important to what Catherine said, is making sure those people are comfortable coming in and what the environment needs to be for them to feel safe as we do open up the offices. Most people I'm hearing are pretty positive, but I also understand some people aren't, and there's still some people that have concerns. I've got a planning coming up toward the end of June, and they still want to keep it virtual. So they're, you know, they still, in their mindset is they're going to still stay pretty locked down and keep things virtual, where I've got other companies that are ready to go in person right now. So it's sort of the mix of understanding where the team is, where your individual team members are, where the company is, and proceed from that direction. So Marshall, talking about, you know, companies and planning, I had a question about, you know, a company that I work with is, they've been doing 30-day intervals of planning for the last several months. And now we're talking about, you know, should we go back to the 90-day? Are you seeing anything with any of that with your members of what the planning cycle looks like and how that has changed or where it's going in the future?
Sure. So really what we saw is when you look at March 12th, when the world, I say March 12th, my running joke is March had 12 days and April had 49 days. So, but when things were disrupted, we immediately got an aggressive stance towards the members that we work with. And basically within the portfolio members that I have the privilege working with, we looked at the business and it fell into three categories: either not impacted or a slight uptick in business, or impacted a little and needed to be mindful, or severely impacted. And those three categories, or those three assessments, in conjunction with working with those leaders, determine the planning intervals. We encouraged all of them to do adaptive plannings or sprint plannings initially, because things were changing so much. So we immediately took everyone to a 30-day plan unless they said business is not impacted at all. So Jason, in most cases, we've gone through 2 of those 30-day cycles with each of those members. Every time we go into that, we ask on the back end coming out for the next planning, are we ready to go? We didn't go 30 to 90, we've gone 30 to 45. And actually just globally, what I would tell you I'm seeing, Jason, is it most likely will not be until we get into the June events that we start thinking about Q3 as a whole quarter, because many of the things will have settled by then.
How are you looking at their plans? So a lot of companies that we work with, our members, we've created a plan for the year. How are you looking at those plans, and how are you thinking about adjusting them? What should companies be thinking about?
Well, that's a good question, and that is much bigger than even our discussion here, but I'm going to give it a swing. We at Petrocoach, we look at, think about what we went through this year. So January 1st, between January 1st and March 12th, we were operating against a one-page strategic plan that was set up for calendar year 2020. We had our annual key initiatives, or those most important 6 to 8 things we should be focused on. As of March 12th or so, we were severely disrupted. Then we went through this period of a defensive position for a while, which basically was inside out, meaning we took care of ourselves as human beings, then our family, then our workforce, then our business. We came through that. And so now if you get to June 1st-ish, if not later than July 1st, we have a methodology of getting back on track. And what getting back on track means is we're going to take those plans that were set forth for calendar year 2020. We need to take those out, and we need to go relook at the targets that we set for the year. We need to look at the annual key initiatives that we set for the year. And we need to almost reset an annual plan. Not almost, we do need to reset an annual plan for the back half of the last 6 months of the year, and then quickly get into Q3 priority setting. So yes, we have workshops to do that. Yes, those members that are currently being coached will go through that same exercise. But I encourage everyone, formally or informally, going through that situation so we have clear direction. Only last piece I'll lay in there, Jason, is the fact that everything I've seen with every member that I personally work with that's willing to fight to get their business, quote, back on track, have gone through this in a way that has minimized what could be the downside risk. And with that, I want to kick a question back to you. I know you have a member there in Arizona, company nurse, and I remember speaking with Paul initially, and it was really a shock about what it could do to the business. But through working with them, tell a little bit about how they've pushed through this and not waited for it to just come back to them.
Yeah, so their business, they do triage services for workman comp claims. And during this time of year, about 50% of their business is school districts. So with all the school districts closed, about 50% of the revenue went to zero in one day. And their revenue continued to drop as other businesses were kind of stopping because people weren't working in the office. So there weren't a lot of workman comp claims going on. So that was part of the challenge that they were having. And so they decided, quickly, like looking and saying, how do we rebuild? What is it that we're really offering? What can we use with our assets we have? And so their biggest asset is a whole pool of nurses on staff. It's expensive to recruit, it's expensive to train. So they wanted to make sure that whatever they did, they kept those nurses. And that was what was really critical to them. So for them, they pivoted and said, how can we use our nurses? And it was really addressing a lot of the COVID issues and the COVID related issues and workplace health issues that were occurring. And so that was a really fast pivot for them, where they were able to help other companies and employers with issues related to somebody gets sick in the workplace. And so they were able to build on that and help people through it. Since then, they've done an additional pivot, which is creating an app using software driven by an app that is allowing you to test your employees to see, are they ready to come in? And so literally on their phone, when they come in, they can actually show whether it's going to show up green or it's going to show up red based on some health questions. So they walk in the door, they know how their employees are doing. It requires a temperature check and some questions. A lot of times when we go to, whether it's gone to the doctor to ask these questions, it's pretty standard, but the idea is that they're able to create a database of understanding, like, this is how our employees are doing. It helps with liability. It also helps with making sure that their employees are healthy, so they know where people are. And so that's been a really successful pivot for them. The other thing that it allowed them to do, and it's sort of additional, is they looked at their revenue model, and they realized through the revenue model that there were some challenges within it, where they would sign a contract and payment would come later. So it could almost take them somewhere between 8 to 12 months before they would see $1 off of a contract. And so it allowed them to look at their business model and say, how do we adjust it, right? So going forward now, contracts are going to look a lot different as they do this, so they are not waiting for the cash. They found this through this crisis, they found this to be a real weakness in their business model. What can they change so that they can monetize these things much quicker? And that was as a result of this crisis. So out of this, they're going to come out a little bit stronger of a company with a better business model. And I'm seeing that in a lot of other companies. Marshall, have you seen any of your members, or Catherine, have you seen, I'll actually go to Catherine. Catherine, have you seen some of your members make some pivots that you think are long lasting and helpful
I
for them?
certainly have. We have, well, first, a lot of our members have done lots of amazing things and I think have had lots of successful pivots. One member that we work with actually in Canada, so they supply food to the local schools there. And so within literally 24 hours, 24, 48 hours, they went to having no revenue coming in the door. And so a pivot that they have done is they're now supplying food to homes, so home delivery. And that has turned out to be something that they can build upon, and even looking at how do we, supply food to local grocery stores. And so I know that that is a new business model for them, and we're currently working with them to build those things out.
Jason, I have a question for Catherine while I have Catherine on the spot here, which is always so much fun. Jason, you're in Arizona, but Catherine and I are from the South for all obvious reasons, right? Not that anyone would ever known that, right? But in the South, there's a lot of handshakes and hugs and high fives, and culture is very important in all businesses. Catherine, could you speak to us a little bit during this time which we're all remote and we don't have physical interaction with each other? What are some of the things we can be doing so that it doesn't feel so awkward about the people that we work with and how we interact with them?
So I always like to see how quickly can I go from a handshake to a hug. And so I know that's been pretty hard because I can't give anybody hugs anymore. So, I mean, I think a couple of things. We, of course, everybody's gone to video now. And usually instead, if I have a question, instead of texting somebody, I'll just pick up the phone, but I'll FaceTime them instead. And so it takes effort, and you do have to be intentional because, those relationships, if you don't continue to build upon them, can go away very quickly. And so I also think it's helpful just to call and check in for no reason at all, just to see how somebody's doing. Because I think this has had lots of different effects on people. One day you're doing great and the next day you're not. And so being very intentional with calling and checking on people. Don't just send a text, but rather, pick up the phone, FaceTime, Zoom somebody. We all have those capabilities.
Okay. Jason, we have a couple of questions coming from the audience, and I'll pitch this out here and I'll let you go at it. So how often should we be looking at and revising our priorities and KPIs during the transition back? I'll let you go first.
Yeah, well, I think it all depends on what your rhythm is. So one of the things, as we kind of talked about, is a lot of companies we work with decide to go on to 30-day planning cycles. And so I've got a couple companies that are still doing 30-day planning cycles, and they want to stay on that rhythm through the summer. They've already made that decision. So depending on what your rhythm is, and also have to look and say, are the priorities that we have set, are they the right priorities? We did a planning session, I don't know, maybe a month ago, where part of it was before their business was really impacted, there was about hiring people. When we came back and I looked a week and a half later, and I said, are these really going to be the priorities you want to continue with? And he was like, yeah, no, I think we're not going to be hiring, because they realized right after that, their business started to drop. And so looking at it and saying, okay, if the priorities you have are not the priorities you're truly committed to and working on, then that's the right time to go back and revisit. It's not about saying they're too hard or too difficult. They just might not be the right ones right now. Once again, you set the plan at the beginning of the year, and so the goal is by the end of the year to be completed, but along the way, things have happened. If that's not the right priority for you, then you need to make the adjustment right away.
Yeah.
I think it's important also, to communicate those things. So what are your communication rhythms? Where are you having those conversations? You don't want somebody with all of us being in different places now. How do you keep that communication going? And so you don't want somebody working off in a silo by themselves on something that's no longer relevant. So what are your communication rhythms, and where are you having the discussions of, is this still relevant? Do we still need to be working on this?
I think to your point, Jason, I have to simplify things in my mind in regards to absolutely has to be worked on, really, really needs to be worked on. This would be nice to work on. And this is like so far out blue sky that, it's dreamland. And people easily get distracted and pile up too much on their plate. You should be, at a minimum, amongst the leadership team, asking yourself what absolutely has to get done. And in many cases, what has to get done is getting the revenue engine started back up. And then I'm also seeing, and we have information we could send out, I'm also seeing that people have not adapted yet to selling virtually. And I tell teams all the time, you'll either take on virtual selling when you want to, or you'll take on virtual selling when you have to. And I believe those companies that come out of the gate strong, and virtual selling is a natural relationship where that the next time that your customers hear from you is not asking for something in return, will be those companies that succeed in transition to that virtual environment. So,
yeah, I kind of do the same thing, but I approach it a little different, and, people are, well, we're doing this now. I'm like, well, I don't know what now looks like, because this could be this, people say the new normal. I'm not a huge fan of that statement, because it's just where we are. So it's just what it is. I think it's going to stay for a while, and it could be up and down and different things. And so some of the things you're doing today are probably things that you've probably thought about doing in your business. A company I work with in Florida, they've gone to everything paperless, right? So that's been a big initiative. It was not an initiative before this started, but now they've taken all of their, they do a lot of service. So all their tech and service providers are all now going paperless. Customers don't have to sign anything. It's made their life easier. It's going to reduce their cost, right? It was born out of this situation, but going forward, it's what's going to help drive their business. I was talking to a member that Catherine and I work with in Las Vegas, and he was talking about the MGM hotels, and they're going to do, we've all been to Vegas, and you walk in, the first thing you're hit with is that long check-in line. That's going away. They're going to start rolling out technology as they open that's going to truly make the check-in process all virtual, right? So once again, born out of necessity. Are we going to stop doing it once this necessity ends? No, these are all things that you can still continue to drive through your business, manage expenses, help increase revenue. So I think those are all things that are happening that people need to focus on and say, this is not a short term. This really is a nice solution for us, a nice direction to go.
I hope that, Jason, that mindset that are causing people to think about all the things they do. I think that the biggest negative to this is that for those sitting around, I think we can be in control of our next normal on our way to the new normal. And I think we can also be trendsetters in what the next normal is. But I certainly hope that people roll out of this and they keep that mindset of disrupting themselves in their business and personally frequently. I know I pulled through a credit union the other day, and the lady popped up on a video screen, and I thought, okay. And I said, where are you? And she was 150 miles from where I was. And with the technology and the scanning devices and everything, I made my deposit. We had interaction. And I thought, I had a friend of mine that's an SVP in a bank. And I said, do you guys still use personal tellers in the drive-through window? He said, yes. I said, let me tell you, I had a great experience with a credit union. And I can't imagine that being behind a piece of glass is not a very personal interaction anyway. I can't imagine that stays in. So I think people will have to continue to disrupt themselves and hopefully give back in other areas of business where they feel like they may be taking some away. Catherine, I have another question for Catherine.
Yeah, well,
Catherine, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to make a point to that really quick. There are a lot of things that are working with this new normal. And so I hope that that's a key takeaway that everybody has from this is don't drag the past with you. If what you're doing right now really does work, then continue to build on that. Yes, there are things that you should look back on to say, do we need to continue to do it the way we did pre-COVID? But also, what is working right now, and how can we continue to push that forward?
Well, let's talk about something that may not be working for some out there, and we could use a little advice from you, Catherine. The late night cookies and chips and ice cream is not working great for me. What are those things that during high stress times where that, there's always concern in mind, what can we do to be taking better care of ourselves?
I'm so glad that you asked me this question, Marshall.
Better you than me.
No, I certainly, I feel like nowadays the phrase mental health has become very popular, and I'm glad. I'm very, very happy about that, and I think it should continue to be a thing that we talk about. And so several things that you could do. If you are focused on the positive and what's going really well, you cannot also stay in a state of negativity. So practicing different gratitude exercises, writing down things that you're thankful for, going back to the milk and cookies, Marshall. Have some of those if you want to. Also, don't let your fitness go off the rails and wake up every single night at midnight to eat milk and cookies. But make sure, you get out there, and even if it's just going for a walk. I used to really dislike running. I've now kind of fallen back in love with running for a couple of different reasons. So if I want to go out and sprint as hard as I can, 2 miles, I go out and do that. Or if I want to go out and simply walk a half a mile, I go out and do that. And I'm thankful that I do either, because I'm simply getting out there and moving my body versus, sitting in a chair all day. A lot of us are going from, sleeping to sitting in front of a computer, and then not very long, you're going right back to the bed to sleep, and you do it all over again. So I think it is very important that you stay active, whatever active means to you, and also be mindful too of the things that you eat and that you're putting into your body.
Okay. Jason, let's go back to the question queue here. Now seems like a time we could use some coaching, but things are a little tough financially. Where could we start? How could we start with some means of coaching?
Well, I know with us, we have workshops and webinars that you can attend. We've got what are we calling it? What are we calling the new one? Back on track. Excuse me. Back on track workshops that are happening. I know we've got one tomorrow actually. That coaches are led by a coach and an accountability coach to help walk you through creating a new plan, setting up for the rest of the year, and setting up for what Q3 needs to look like based on sort of, as Marshall talked about, that revised plan. So that's one way of starting with it. Marshall, do you have some other ideas?
There's various progressions from getting started all the way through an advanced relationship. So it's important to understand what it is you're looking to do. There's ways to get into, if we're talking about, planning on a budget, if you will, or easing into developing those habits. There's the workshop route. There's the ability to hop in and plan as a group. There's the ability to move towards a virtual setting to whether you're doing it virtually. And then there's also moving all the way through to an in-person, which we believe in June starts to come back online. I would encourage you though, oftentimes people look at, coaching as just an add-on expense, and it really should be done in conjunction and interviewing your coach to make sure you're in it together, to find ways to offset any expenses associated with coaching so that you can put those in the background as you focus on what you need or want to accomplish through your planning events. I will say that also you can go to the website under the petracoach.com website and look for resources. Specifically, we were talking about the Back on Track topics. They're inside we have a Petra Vault, and you can follow up with us afterwards. We have a Petra Vault in which you can go get your hands on tools that will exercise your brain in regards to those things that you could be or would be missing if you otherwise went on your own. So, we'll put that out there, but we kind of put it back on others to reach out to us and help us guide you. Here's what I do know that you're going to get from our coaching community. You're not going to get told what you want to hear. You're going to get told what you need to hear. And then it's up to you to go make the decision whether or not you're all in. So it's like anything else. You'll get out what you put in. How committed are you to doing the work? And if you do the work, it works.
A new tool that I think all of you should check out. So that is our return to work checklist. So that would be a really good tool. It is in that vault. So petracoach.com/the vault. If you go to our website, it's very easy to find. But that is something that I would certainly check out.
Yeah, there's a lot of good documents there. I think the big takeaway from Marshall, what you're saying is, for us, we have a lot of different products, from one-on-one coaching to doing the workshops with yourself or with your team, to doing virtual plannings, to doing in person. So there's a lot of different options and a lot of different methods to accomplish what the goals are. And we're here to help. So we'll do whatever we can to help you where you're looking to go. Another question that came up, Marshall, was, and I think this is a good one. What's the most interesting pivot you've heard about since this all started? What's the most interesting pivot that you've heard about, or a company that you've worked with?
Well, I don't know if interesting means odd or interesting just means an advanced attempt at moving forward. I've been certainly impressed with a building construction company in New Orleans who is going to take their business to a virtual superintendent model. We know that during this time in which construction sites rarely closed and fell under a lot of scrutiny in regards to, this company was well on their way to developing a virtual superintendent model that removes a lot of the human interaction, but still, not only still allows to move the project forward responsibly, but will also allow that superintendent to be in control of hundreds of millions of dollars worth of projects versus having a lot of additional overhead. So that's one particularly that's come up that's been quite impressive. I know, Catherine, you brought up, one as well about instead of going to schools or, in some cases, restaurants, that direct to consumer seems to be very popular in several models.
You want to get that, Marshall?
That's true. Something else, because I know the construction industry has been impacted differently. Generally they see the ripple effects from things like this later on down the road. Sometimes it's, it could be even 12 months. And so I heard an interesting statistic the other day. So this was back, I believe, between March and April. So 10% of the workforce had been laid off. So that's 13,000, I don't remember the exact number, but a little over 13,000 people who are without a job. And so one member that we work with, TW Frierson, they're here in Nashville. They have created a COVID task force. And so it has been amazing to see all of the work that they have done to keep themselves moving forward and also to mitigate anything that could potentially come later on down the road that could affect their business.
And I think pivots come in all different shapes and sizes. A restaurant group that we work with in New Orleans, and they're pivoting in the way that they're completely changing the restaurant. They look at the restaurants and say that model is not going to work from what they were as a full service and a high-end upscale tablecloth type restaurant group. And so they've completely changed their model. They've not gone to a quick serve, but sort of a hybrid between a full service and a quick serve, where they do have full waitress service and wait staff, but it's far more scaled down. The menu's scaled down. And they just said the playbook we were running before in our business is not going to work. And so they're looking to say, how can we do it different? Before they were just open for dinner. Now they're going to do lunch and dinner. Make more options. They'll come to you. They're set up. They've got a whole bar group. They'll come to your house and they'll not only cater the food, they'll bring a bartender where people don't want to necessarily go out. They'd rather have people come in and they can, they'll do something with a health check so they can understand where people have been, help identify that they're healthy, come into your house and put on a party for you. So I think a lot of companies are doing different things to say, where is my business now? Where is it going? And meet it where you're going, right? I love the old statement of what Wayne Gretzky said. He skated where the puck was going, not where it was. So that's kind of important to look at your own business, say, where are we going, and not just where has it been. I think if companies live in the past of where it's been, that's where they go run into challenges.
So Jason, I want to bring back up and introduce this, and Catherine brought up meeting rhythms earlier. And I want to talk about something I think often gets overlooked as it relates to the pivot process. And that is companies rarely spend enough time on strategy, and pivots fall into the category of strategy. And we typically will operate in a reactive type mode, which is execution, reaction, and execution. And so I just want to talk briefly about the monthly meeting format encompasses a place in which you can talk about strategy. And I encourage companies doing planning, when they get in the mode of talking about strategy, block out everything else. Even if it's in a monthly meeting, go ahead and take a break, take your lunch break or whatever, come back and make that the only thing you talk about. And what you find is you have to build endurance to it. The first time you do it, you can't give it 5, 10, 15 minutes into it and you're exhausted because your brain's having to work so hard. But I encourage companies to build up that endurance around their strategic thinking in a way that lends itself to strategy. And I wonder if either the two of you could share your thoughts about companies that have strategy sessions that are committed specifically to the act of thinking differently.
Yeah, I do. I work with a company out of Los Angeles, and they typically do a once a month all day meeting, and they've actually right now they're doing it twice a month, and they're focused just on strategy. And it's mostly about looking at their business and understanding what are the challenges with their current business model and how do they get there. So they had a very aggressive BHAG they're working towards, and they're still committed to that BHAG. And so they're looking at their business saying, okay, what's the strategy now that we have to do? And so they've been working, overtime on revising it so that it can still happen, understanding that it's going to look a little different and a path to get there. So we had devised a very clear path of understanding of this, of what it's going to look like to get there. Well, that path is completely off track right now. And so they're focusing on the strategy of saying, how do we get there? I've encouraged a lot of companies to do it. They do it very clearly. I think that people need to do it more often right now, just to understand where they are and where they're going. Some of the tools, and if you go to the vault, one of the tools in there is called SWET, or strengths, weaknesses, and trends of the industry. Looking, a lot of times you spend time just talking about SWOT on our own company and looking at what are our strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities with our own company. That's great, but now it's really important to look at the industry and understand where the industry is. What are the strengths of the industry? What are the inherent weaknesses? And what are those trends? And how can we address those, right? Once again, it's about skating to where the puck is going, not where it's been. So focusing on those things are really helpful in helping to devise your strategy and what that will look like.
Catherine, you have any companies you're working with where you see they do a good job on strategy and looking for those pivots?
So I would certainly, I think one, change can be a scary thing for everybody. And so moving forward, it might not be the right thing, but just move, do something, don't sit still when things like this happen. And so members, yes, that we as Petra work with, there are a few that I specifically work with that from a strategy standpoint, I think it kind of goes back even to those 30-day planning sessions as well. And so making sure, that you're doing those things more often, instead of having just a monthly meeting, take time to do 2 meetings strictly focused on strategy, on the big picture, and then having those 30-day planning sessions to help you achieve those goals.
Yeah, I think it's really key. And one thing I've been highlighting is if you're going to a 30-day rhythm of planning, that becomes extremely tactical of what are we going to achieve over the next 30 days. It's very tactical. You need to do something in between to make sure there's a strategy component to back up and endorse what those tactics are, right? So you just don't want to be, hey, these are the next things we need to work on the next 30 days and forget everything else, right? You still need to have some strategy behind it of where you're going.
I think another thing to add to that too is we live in a world where you hear often from the staff, if I were the CEO, I would do this. And this is the time in which when we have some of those in the workforce that really want to be involved and attached to something of significance, that oftentimes our next strategy or our next pivot may reside outside the executive team. I know I listened to Barrett Ursick one time talking about how to take Happy Lawns and advance it forward. It came from one of the field service techs talking about he was an accomplished Frisbee player, and he said, if you'll just take a pamphlet and stick it in a Happy Lawns Frisbee, I can stand and be doing work in 1 yard and I can hit 8 other lawns at the same time. And so that was something that didn't come from the boardroom and may have never come from the boardroom. So this is a time in which for all those who want to participate and play armchair CEO, they may be sitting on the next best ideas. So it can't be a free for all, but I think we should be asking everyone involved on the team, what could we go do differently in an effort to continue on our mission.
Yeah, it's important to have those meeting rhythms that allow that to happen, though, right? So looking at, are you doing daily huddle? Are you doing weekly meetings? Are they cascading in a way that allows that information to flow straight up and straight down, right? So you need to make sure that it's coming up, because you're right. A lot of the great ideas in most organizations come from the people that are actually doing the work and understanding how can we make this more efficient? What can we do in a different way? What can we do better, cheaper, faster? Right? It's going to come from the people that are doing the work. And so if you don't have those rhythms or the ability to hear that information, get that feedback, you're going to be missing out on those things.
So executives, let me get this straight. Executives don't do any work. You mean you get it from the people that actually do the work. Is that what you said?
The people on the front
line? Yeah, that's exactly what I said. Without question.
What else you guys got?
Looking in front of me. I think it's, I think to the point of, we kind of touched on a little bit at the beginning about how do you bring back people? What have you seen as effective from the standpoint of bringing back people? I know that, and I think we've got some information that we even put together. Maybe you want to share on that, Marshall. And I think it's information that's in the vault a little bit, but maybe talk a little bit about that return to work mindset and assistance that you've seen.
Yeah, so we have a return to work checklist, which is a combination of things that we've either witnessed or have compiled from best practices of those who are embarking upon this journey, if you will. And really, my mindset, is possibly, I'm not aggressive in my stance in regards to how that I engage in the public now. Nothing more than I think you exercise good judgment. Our restaurants locally are open at 100%. Do I have the desire to jump in a restaurant with 100 people sitting elbow to elbow? I really don't. However, the other side of me says, look, at some point we have to move on. And at some point we need to be responsible for our own actions, not just for ourselves, but in respect for others. I really believe that if you're in those places where that your restrictions have been lifted, that as long as you're taking good care of yourself and you're being aware of, I had a company today said, one of the executives said, look, I had a little bit of a sore throat. I don't think it's COVID, but I'm not going to the office today. So I'm of the mindset that the restrictions have been lifted and it's inconsistency with what they're encouraging, then let's start to move forward. I'll go back to that. It's not a one size fits all. And here's where I think we're going to get into a little bit of a rub, okay? I've got 100 people, okay? And I need to bring back 100 people. And now all of a sudden I say, you know what? Accounting, you don't need to be in the office. You go ahead and stay home. My customer care center, I need you in the office. Someone else phones in and says, look, I'm 70 years old. I'm type 2 diabetes, whatever else that goes with it. Can I stay home? What's going to happen here is it's not going to be a one size fits all. And some people are looking for, give me the rules. And we as employees or on teams are going to have to say, we're going to have to be a little bit agile here and a little flexible in an effort to make all of this work. So I really think about that, and there's really no good answer for that.
What's the impact of the culture, would you say, on that, though? You've got some people that are coming back to work, some people that are not yet coming back to work or not comfortable. How do you manage the culture within the company?
Catherine, you'll speak to that first, and then I can go.
So, yes, I think it also, depends on, you have introverts, you have extroverts, you have some people that love to be around others, you have some people that don't. And I think it goes back to being intentional with the relationships that you have. I have a great relationship with everybody on our team, and I've been home since March 16th. I do not feel disconnected from anybody. If questions come up, call somebody and get answers. I call people just to call people. And I think continuing to do things like that, and also, make your Zoom meetings fun as well, to bring a sense of humor to this situation. So you can get creative in how you continue to build upon your culture, even though you're not all there in person with one another.
So I would just, my response on that is, and I've heard this said more than once over the last several weeks, there's really that peacetime leadership and wartime leadership. And I think now is no better time than right now. Some leaders are going to have to convert to wartime leadership, and that is a little bit more of the unpopular kind of decisions. Now, if it is this intent of bringing people back together for the fun factor, that is not what I'm saying. That is absolutely not what I'm saying. But if there are essential business functions that cannot be properly carried out in a remote setting that impacts the business negatively, we may have to go above and beyond to accommodate how to make that work. And as far as, how does that impact the culture? It's going to take a lot of communication, a lot of trust in leadership, and we're just going to have to reinforce that we're in times that are extremely different than any time we've ever had before. And look, the old saying, you can question what I say, you can't question from the heart it comes from. It's time for wartime leadership, and it's time to move our businesses forward in a responsible way so that we get back to where everyone wants to get to, and that is a little more normalcy.
I think the important part, though, is through that is making sure that we consider the fact that we might have some people working in the office and some people working remotely, and that is still going to create some divide. And you have to make sure that that culture you created is keeping people together. Right now, when people were working separately and everybody's pretty much working from home, or as many people as could work at home in a company, companies I saw do a lot of different things, certainly around meeting rhythms where they really amp things up. Question is, now are they going to amp things down from a communication standpoint once some people return back to the office? I think companies still need to be aware and cognizant of the fact that some people might be in the office and people might be at home, and you still need to keep everybody working together. All right, still work on those communication rhythms. Don't just abandon the things you were doing because the time says so. Do it when things are right. I had a company that was doing 2 huddles a day, 7 days a week. And they dropped the weekend huddles, the 4 weekend huddles, about a week ago. And next week they decided they're going to stop the afternoon huddle. So they're looking there, and then if they decide that they need to bring it back, they're very willing to bring it back. They're just managing to where things are, but they're not willing to be so say, okay, we're going to stop things right away. They've really been slow about it, just to make sure they keep everybody together. We have a question, Marshall and Catherine. How do you decide which furloughed employees to bring back, and how do you bring them back? It's a great question. So a lot of companies are facing this issue. How do you decide which furloughed employees to bring back, and how do you bring them back?
Catherine, you want to go first, or you want me to?
I'll come in after you.
Okay. So this fits in naturally with the conversation we're just having. Which furloughed employees to bring back? Typically, again, essential to the business, and we use that word essential, and someone's going to take offense to that, but there are certain functions that the leadership team needs to agree which are the ones that are most impactful, that kind of hold ground on the business first. Someone has to make the selection, right? If you can't bring them all back. Now, what I did not read in there, possibly not bringing some back long-term, but I think you just have to look at what are the needs of the business, what can you accommodate from both physical setting or financial concerns that you may have, if that's why they were furloughed in the first place, and then go that route. So that's all I had on that one.
Well, and I also think too, now is a really great time to evaluate the people that you have on your team. So who are your A players, who are not your A players? And you could also look at it, from that route, which might not be very popular, but who are those people that that show up for you, that help you move things forward? And then who are those people that in the back of your mind, you should have let them go a long time ago and you just haven't pulled the plug? Now is, if there is an opportunity to do that, it's right now.
Yeah. And a company I was talking today, they said, well, they identified through this process, they didn't furlough anybody, but they determined that 3 out of their 5 accounting people on staff were not, that they thought were C players before, really are actually proven to be D players right now. So they're looking to make the change. This is the best time right now. If you're looking for people, or you don't think you have the right people on the team, this is the right time right now to start looking elsewhere, because a lot of people have been negatively impacted. This creates opportunity to go find those, because 3 months ago, it was hard to find people. Everybody we worked with said, I can't find people. Those opportunities are out there right now. People are available and willing if you're looking for people. So it's a great time right now to look at your talent and say, how do we upgrade the talent? I think bringing back, furloughed employees, I think it's one of those things, and I've had a couple companies that have done that already. And those members have, they've made sure the communication, along the way. So that's been key. Hopefully you've been communicating along the way. If you haven't, it's reaching out to them and saying, hey, this is, we're glad, we want you back. You're part of our family. We want you here. This was a tough period that we had to go through. We had to make some difficult decisions. And I think it's important, once again, to communicate how, once again, how important they are, how much they're needed, and how much you want them there, and bring them back that way, and make sure the team is ready to embrace them coming back.
So you two struck a nerve on me, and I'm always always say this. So here comes a dose of medicine for all the leaders out there, and that is,
oh boy,
if you do hide behind this period in an effort to let people go that you should have let go prior to this happening, shame on you. So I hope the lesson is learned. When we have C players, it's our responsibility to set them free, because they often become someone else's A player. So if you get off the hook this time and say, well, we need to let these go, and this is a good time to do it because we furloughed employees anyway, that may end up leading to your decision. But don't take those decisions lightly, and make sure that moving forward, because guess what? If you have C players that you end up letting go that were furloughed, chances are the rest of the organization all knew those were C players for quite some time. And they're looking to use the leader to make the tough decisions along the way. And they actually all know who needs to be released into the wild anyway. And so shame on you for not getting it done. That one always strikes a nerve with me. And, I'm always going to have the same answer. But
it always happens, right, Marshall? It always happens.
And so those of you that are on here and listening, if you're not familiar with the term A player, B player, BC player, reach out to us and let us know. Certainly have resources that will help you identify who your A players are and who your C players are.
Yeah. Jason, what about something on my mind, and I keep it. People don't do strategy enough, and also companies don't talk about cash management enough. We would do plannings in the past, and we get in the mode of cash management discussions, and no one wants to talk about numbers except a bunch of geeky analytical people. Now, however, we have everyone's attention. Mm-hmm. Now we have everyone's attention with payroll protection program. But guess what? Payroll protection program comes and goes, but the residual lasts for the remainder of the year. And I tell people, this sensitivity to accounting and bookkeeping does not stop until you have effectively filed your 2020 calendar year tax return. What are some of the things they can be doing to position themselves starting right now so they don't get to next spring and start swimming back upstream, if you will?
Regarding looking at their finances?
That's right.
I think one of the things, if I were to, if you go back to 2007, 2008, companies really got very tight with how they manage their money. And as the economy has grown and businesses have grown, I think they've gotten kind of lazy and sort of fat in how they look at things. Things are just not as tight as they were. A company I work with, where we just did a cash flow analysis, we found $23,000 a month of recurring monthly expenses that they didn't need. $23,000 a month. And we just canceled them, and they're not coming back. But that's how, business was great. We can add that as a monthly service. No problem. Sign up for it. And I think a lot of companies have found this. And so I think it becomes a due diligence, or being diligent to what they're doing right now and making sure that continues. I always ran my company on a 13-week rolling cash flow. That's how I managed the finances of it, making sure that we always had the right amount of cash and we managed our expenses. And the companies that get away from that, that's when they run into trouble. Hopefully through this, yesterday we did a forum group, and one of the takeaways was, what you learn. And one of the people, they said, just didn't have enough cash saved to the side. We put everything we had into growth. Everything was so focused on growth. there was nothing set aside for what happens if growth stops. And that's kind of where we are right now. So what are you doing to put away that money and protect money on the side to make sure for those rainy days that are occurring right now, so the companies are prepared? And I think the habits that people are in right now financially, because I do believe people have developed some pretty good habits right now, need to make sure they continue on. Those things need to live on in perpetuity, because that's how you remain fiscally responsible and solvent throughout this.
Catherine, what questions do you have?
Well, Marshall, we've covered a lot of the questions that I had.
Okay. Then I'll ask your thoughts on something, Catherine. So over the last several years, if you pull studies, not just one or two studies, several studies that will show that employee engagement is somewhere between 28 and 33% going into this crisis. So with that being said, that means 1 in 3 people on your team are fully engaged in the work they do. What could we do to improve upon that employee engagement, to think if we could move the needle from low 30s to even 50% of employee engagement would be a huge increase in productivity. And it's going to be harder than ever to move the needle. Is there anything you can think of that we could do to drive employee engagement up?
One, I'm glad that I've worked with you and I can understand your long-winded questions. And
You usually ask the question, answers it along the way. So it's in there. It's in there somewhere.
Follow that trail with me. So I think, to increase employee engagement, I'm really big on just asking the question, why aren't you engaged? What do we need to do differently to get you engaged? And I think that would be the first step. And I think you would find a lot of your answers there just by having that conversation.
Okay. Yeah, I think you have to look at it and say, why are people not engaged? What's missing? And is it are they working for the wrong company?
Yeah.
It could be. Are they not doing the right job? It could be. Is the company communicating to them and treating them the way they want to be treated, and looking at those things? So it's not. I don't think there's one simple thing to look at. I think you have to look at it in different pieces. Do I have the right people? We always ask the question, would you enthusiastically rehire somebody? I think it's also fair to ask the question to them, would you enthusiastically come back to work here, right? And so you got to look at it on both sides, because it just might not be the right fit for the company. It might not be the right fit for the employee. So they have to look and be honest and say, is this the right thing? Yeah.
Well, and I think too, people need to understand why they're getting up and coming to work every day. At Petra, I know exactly why I wake up every morning and I come to this job, and it's to have a positive impact on 10 million human beings. And I know that everything that I do, I have the opportunity to leave somebody better than I found them. And so I think it's important for people to understand why they're even there. Are they coming just to collect a paycheck, or are they coming for a larger reason? And I think that has a lot to do with it.
I would agree.
So we're coming up on the top of the hour to close this down. So closing remarks. Catherine, you want to take us out, and I'll go to Jason, and then I'll give mine, and we'll be wrapped up on 60 minutes.
So thanks everybody for joining. I hope you have some takeaways from this. If you don't, then you should take more notes, because I think a lot of great things came out of this conversation that we're having. If you have follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Again, if you go to our website, we have a lot of tools and resources to help you through all this craziness that's happening. And again, thanks for joining.
Jason?
I'd like to say the same thing. Thank you for joining. Hopefully you were able to get some information out. I think it's important to understand your team, still communicate with your team. Don't drop those things. Don't stop those rhythms of communication just because it feels like we're getting back to the way of whatever normal is. Still do those things that keep the team together and still keep the team focused. Once again, we've got a lot of resources, Catherine said, on our website. Feel free to reach out to us. If you go to our website, petracoach.com, you'll see in the big box that says COVID-19. And if you go in there, you'll see all of our webinars and our workshops that are coming up. So we've got some good ones coming up. please go there, find information. You can also go onto the vault, get some of the documents that we talked about to help you really move your company forward. Marshall?
I'll just say that, you know, unprecedented times, that we have the ability to make the outcome that we want, and that don't give up, and you don't always have to feel like you're going at it alone. So with that said, you know, let us be a resource to help you if we can. And we wish you all the best. Stay healthy and safe out there, and come back to another Coach's Corner, and maybe we'll help you the next time as well.